Ignite your curiosity with Austin next. We're watching Austin transform from a thriving ecosystem into a global superstar. With our host, Jason Scharf, we aspire to better comprehend the true nature of innovation. Together, we will uncover what makes a successful ecosystem and navigate the technologies shaping our future. Now let's dive into what's next.
Today's episode is the opening fireside chat from March's Austin Data Science Salon, where I spoke with Cheryl Sew Hoy, the founder and CEO of Tiny Health. With AI being the current buzzword, zeitgeist, and frankly, all-encompassing topic, we discuss both the tailwinds and challenges founders face when raising venture capital in the current environment. I hope you enjoy the episode. With telling everybody about what Tiny Health is, and specifically given the conference, how is data, ML, AI integral to what you're doing?
Yeah, great. So Tiny Health is a gut microbiome testing platform. We are the first ever platform, an at-home stool test for moms and babies in the first 1,000 days. During that time period, I was researching is critical for the immune development of the infant. So any major imbalances in the early life microbiome lead to atopic march conditions or chronic conditions like eczema, allergies, asthma, that I personally experienced as a mom of 2 kids. And so wanting to course correct my kids early on with the literature out there, I created Tiny Health about 2 years ago. And now we have stool tests and vaginal tests as well for adults and older kids. And we have a B2B platform leveraging our data set for B2B clients, researchers, scientists, as well as brand partners.
So something that you and I talked about kind of as we were prepping for this was that data, AI, ML are all kind of these buzzwords and all used very interchangeably. So how are you thinking about those at Tiny?
Yeah, so I would say in general, there are maybe 3-4 buckets of AI machine learning companies, which I think we're more in the third bucket. So the first bucket are the core first order AI companies, the large language model companies. There's maybe a dozen, maybe 2 dozen companies in that space, and you get all the PhD scientists working on AI engineering, right? And then in that the explosion of those companies has given way to the second category of companies that are the wrapper AI companies, right? And that I'm sure many of you here are building on top of the first order AI technologies, and that explosion has really, last year was the AI year, and this year too, it seems like. I would say we're in the third category of traditional data science, or what 10 years ago people would call big data, and leveraging machine learning tools and eventually AI tools to really mine our data sets, or even mine the world of literature, scientific literature, as it relates to the microbiome, to create prediction models for predicting disease or health states, and also in the future, that microbial therapeutics, right? Therapeutics that maybe someone is missing certain consortium bacteria that you can now create these therapies for. So that's kind of in the category we're in. And really it's machine learning and predictive analytics, which I think yesterday's session covered quite a bit of. And then maybe there's a fourth category of companies building infrastructure around AI companies. So your GPUs, your data centers that are now, can't cope with capacity and all that, right? So
there does seem to be a little bit of money in that right now.
For sure. For sure, yes. So largely 4 categories. I think sometimes when, the laymen talk about AI, or, they're kind of confusing, or they're not sure which, what category they're talking about. So hopefully that's helpful.
So you recently raised your Series A. Congratulations on that, by the way. How was it that you were highlighting your use of data and machine learning? Was it the centerpiece of the way that you were pitching? These are fun chairs.
I know, they keep
was the centerpiece of what you were pitching, was it a significant aspect, or was it not really in your initial pitch and became, part of the later questions down the line?
Yeah, it's interesting. So when, I think when you want to build a data company, it has to be pretty intentional. You can't be building a consumer company and then, and I'm going to leverage the data eventually, right? Because there's a lot of thought around I think I wasn't here yesterday, but I think there's a lot of thought around data sets you're collecting, the metadata you're collecting, and cleaning that data up, and what technologies you're using so that your data is actually useful. And so I knew that from the start I wanted to build a data company. So that third category, and I knew that eventually we are. Again, I think there's a big topic around how we would leverage AI within the microbiome space. But when we pitched VCs, it was sort of funny because I kind of resisted using the term AI because it was kind of like flashy, and really we're doing machine learning, right? So I did put machine learning in there, but eventually when ChatGPT exploded, I switched to AI. It's really funny. But then, when we were pitching, I think we did, maybe 35% of VCs ask how we were incorporating that. Also, it really depends on which VCs are pitching, right? We are kind of a very, D2C consumer-based company. Like 95% of our revenues are in the first year. We're from D2C, and then 5% from B2B. But this year we're expanding that to 20%. So if you're pitching to a consumer VC, they're not going to understand the data piece as well versus a more data-oriented VC would. But I always clarify, if you're just kind of thinking you're valuing our company based off of the D2C metrics, and they care more about unit economics from that perspective, and recurring revenue and things like that, of course, is really important. But they value e-commerce companies differently. So I always say, no, we're a data company. We're building a much more valuable data set here than a company selling t-shirts, right? So VCs I want on my cap table have to understand that. So during the due diligence process, if that wasn't something they're digging and doubling down into, I feel like they're just not the right VCs for me.
So how much, you said you switched to AI, obviously, in your language post ChatGPT, there's hype cycles and all kind of right ways. So how much of, especially when you get kind of post that initial pitch, were you needing to educate the VCs that you were pitching on the difference and talk about, look, here's the way I'm kind of seeing those 4 buckets. We're more into this very, the 10-year-old data, big data type of company. We're not a wrapper company. How much was that? How much was the expectation where they got it immediately? That
I think for us, because we're sort of more tangential, like ML AI company, not like core. Certainly, like in a lot of our patented technologies, we use shotgun sequencing, and shotgun sequencing is where it's a next-gen sequencing method where you can see all the bacteria in your gut, not just bacteria, but fungi, parasites, viruses. There's like 38 trillion microbes living in and on us, right? And the gut is the most well-researched, most studied, and there's most associations with health or disease states, right? And you get that from your mom during birth and in the first 1,000 days. So it's a really critical time period of gut maturation. So I think from that perspective, there's so much data, trillions of data, microbiome, or microbes, right? Different strains to perform different functions. And then we collect a ton of health data for the consumer, from the birth mode to the feeding mode, nutrition, supplements, and are they in a healthy state, or do they have eczema, allergies, diabetes, and things like that, right? So from that perspective, in our deck, we do draw these correlations. We show the literature backing that, and how we're leveraging data sets to predictive models to even predict there's something called a gut maturation age. So I know if that gut is a 2-month-old or an 8-month-old baby very accurately, or a 3-year-old child, or a 58-year-old man. So from that perspective, VCs are kind of like digging in and kind of wanting to find out, the proprietary part of our algorithm, like which part is proprietary. A lot of people assume that's off the shelf, and that we're kind of just, we're a marketing company, and that I have to correct that perception. And so throughout my pitching process, I've made almost like a slide that shows where does my IP begin, where is the lab processing my sample, and spits out the FASTQ files of all the DNA sequences of the microbes, and then it hits our software, and that's where our patented algorithm starts training that data, the bioinformatics pipeline. And then finally the reporting. So I kind of had a diagram showing that this is really where our IP starts, here's what we've patented, and here's the end product.
So how deep were the VCs going during this process on the algorithms, on the data? Is it, okay, was that slide enough for some? Or is it, hey, I want to go bring in the experts for 10 layers deep?
Yeah. So some, it depends on the VC. Some, again, like more consumer-driven VCs will care less about that. They care more about the unit economics, more customers are coming back and they want to speak to customers. But the more data-driven VCs who understand that data is ultimately what makes us like $1 billion company, a valuable company, would dive deeper into that. And the way I handled that is I got a really good tip in the start of my fundraising process, and if, hopefully this is a useful tip. That for a lot of deep science, deep tech products, it's really hard to educate a VC, and there's just varying knowledge from the VCs, right? And you can't assume they're at the same level, and the deck is not a place where you put all the deep information. So create a Notion doc, and that's actually one of the best advice I got. Create a Notion doc that's your deep dive. Every VC, when they invest in your company, they have to write what's called an investment memo, which, it's funny, when I raised my seed round in 2021, I didn't know this. And so post-closing, or while closing, this VC who put in the first 200K check in me, the seed round when I had nothing, not even a website, sent me like a 20-page memo of my company that she wrote about my company. And I was like, this is amazing, but I had to spend 10 hours correcting all the technical details about my company because they're not correct. And so then the second time when I raised my A, and I got a tip from another VC to create my own investment memo for the VC. In a way, you're doing their job for sure, but you as the founder know your company and your technology the best, right? So I did the work for them, and it was a Notion doc with expandable sections in technology and science and literature. They want to dive deep into all the documentation. Our whole teams, our scientists' CVs were there. On the technology part, you can expand into the AWS setup and the structure of how we process data sets. And so they can go as deep as they want, they can go as little as they want, but that really helped. Everyone kind of like told me that really helped their process in writing their own investment memo. They just copied and pasted that. So I never got that huge memo that I had to spend lots of time correcting, because I knew that when they're reporting up to their LPs and their fund, they're reporting accurate information that I can stand behind. So that one helped with the due diligence process and kind of providing a lot of credibility to what I'm building in a deeper way. A lot of citations were there. And also helped with their investment process.
So talk about the difference now between raising your seed and your A, because right in the middle of those two events, ChatGPT happened. And so how was that perception of data and AI when you were raising your seed versus today?
Or you mean like the pre and post SVB crash? I think that was more of a factor, frankly. So it's funny, right? I think the SVB crash kind of plunged valuations, right, to normal, readjusted to normal levels from the crazy bubble in 2020, 2021. And I raised, admittedly in April 2021, the seed round was $4.5 million in quite a bubble at the peak of frothiness, so to speak. And post SVB's valuations were adjusted significantly, right? But then ChatGPT happened at the same time, and AI companies exploded in all categories that I mentioned earlier, and valuations that were crazy. So I think I noticed a rush of, kind of me included, right? In a way, companies kind of like, how can we adapt to AI tools or mention AI in our pitch just to protect our valuation, right? But obviously, VCs are not, they're smarter and they think they know which is a core AI company, which is not. So I didn't want to do too much of that. At the end of the day, we are a data company, we're a data science company. I have a lot of data scientists in my company. But yeah, it was like, definitely tough environments. Like in 2021, I was planning to raise $2 million. Granted, I did have a prior company. I had exited to Walmart Labs in 2013, so this was my second company. So in a way, in any fundraising environment, it's always better if you've done this before. And so I had planned to raise $2 million in my seed round, and that got oversubscribed within, I think, a month. And then I ended up raising 4.5 at a pretty high valuation for having not built anything. But thankfully, because we spent 2 years in R&D, so we were building a lot of proprietary algorithms and data sets within the company, we didn't launch until April 2022. So it took us about 1 year post raising money to launch. And then now it's and then we started our fundraise process last year. So then 1 year after that, we started the process around April last year, and that's when thankfully we had caught up on our valuation at that point, and we had a pretty good competitive round, getting a term sheet in 6 weeks after pitching, and then I had to pause a little bit to get on Shark Tank. I was invited to pitch on Shark Tank last summer. And then after the show, I kind of resumed fundraising. So I had closed a quick safe in between, because when, in that environment it was certain. I thought, any money. So we closed $1.5 million 6 weeks after the first process, and then when I came back from Shark Tank, 6 weeks later we got 3 term sheets for the A. So pretty good, again, but it came down to revenue. So we had pretty decent revenue in the first full year of operations, and that really helped. And ultimately, VCs were focused on that. They were very focused on revenue, profit, or at least unit economics profit, repeatability, recurring revenue was the lifetime value of the company. And that's also hard, right? Because as a young company, you have a year and a half of data, and you're going to have to project out. So definitely we got rejections from, VC saying we need the LTV to pan out, and I'm like, yeah, wait 3 years then. But you really need the high conviction VCs who see, kind of the value of your company and kind of where you're going with the data set. And ultimately, we got a decent valuation with the 3 term sheets, but it took us until recently. We announced it in early March. We didn't close the full round until February. The last $1 million was the hardest to raise. You'd think getting a lead term sheet, the lead VC took half the round, and all our previous investors took the pro rata. And then the last $1 million was the hardest to raise, Q4, and that dragged us out to Q1. So my tip here too is if you can get as few VCs to take a bigger chunk of your company, or the round, so to speak, do it. It was much harder. I think in Q4, the angels, the small checks disappeared. I think in the foggy times, everyone was like, I have 100K, I have, here's 50K, but this time around, a lot of funds at least want a 5% ownership, 10% ownership. They have these mandates they now have to, they're strictly kind of they're held by their LPs to meet, and they can't budge as much. So because of that, it was really hard to then raise small checks. Then finally, we did a couple of SPVs, and our customers actually invested in Tiny Health, which is really amazing. So you can also leverage your customers who really believe in you. We emailed our top 100, 200 customers, and within a week, was oversubscribed in the SPV. So
in the conversations during the raise, the speed at which, we'll just call it generally AI technology, is changing and iterating has been unbelievable. How are you talking about the data science part, the data products that you have in a product roadmap when the underlying tools that are available to you are changing on such a rapid pace?
Yeah, and that's the challenging part. Ultimately, I don't think too many VCs step into that roadmap as much. We had it in our Notion deep dive document, like a 3-year roadmap, right? When we would actually incorporate some of these tools, what we're doing now with it. A lot of the the rappers companies are building, we're leveraging that for support, chatbots, writing a very personalized note to parents about their child's microbiome state and what to do next. So we're leveraging a lot of these tools within the company. And then, of course, the opportunity for AI is in literature search, right? Like there's tons of research coming out every month in like that research world. But it's more ML than AI. It's training data sets, so it's garbage in, garbage out. So if you don't train your models correctly, you're not going to get good data. Like not all papers are equal in quality and power of study. So there's still a lot of human elements in it. So it's really hard to explain that level of detail. And at the end of the day, VCs just want to know that are you leveraging the tools today to help you be more efficient? And we are, right? We've cut down coding time. There's assisted coding tools now. So it's not a huge, it wasn't a big part of are you? They wouldn't penalize us for not using them, but they just want to know that you're aware, you're incorporating these tools into your company.
We do want to leave some time for questions. So if anybody has any questions they want to ask, please let us know.
Can you expand on the 20-page memo and who mentoring for?
Oh yeah, so the question was the 20-page memo. That was actually during our seed round in 2021 that one of our earliest investors wrote. So she wrote it herself based on what she knew about the company. And I had to correct a lot of the technical, it's good, but it's not technically accurate in some parts. So I just had to spend a lot of time correcting that. So I felt like as a very data technology-driven company, a deep tech from a microbiome science perspective and tools used, I prefer to do that in my A and write that from the get-go, knowing that, learning that VCs have to write these investment memos. Mike, you can share more about that later. Right? So every VCs have to write these investment memos to report to their LPs and why they invested in the company, what diligence process they did, and all the risk and potential value of the company. And so that I found that when I addressed that, it not only addressed the VC's concerns because they're wondering all that too, it really helped them with their work. Oh yes, Mike.
So you're a very data-heavy technical company, but at the same time, there's a bit of a soft, qualitative shift in the market of taking care of your health. Maybe if you could just talk to what you're seeing out there in the market of parents wanting to look out for their kids, or just everyone taking health into more of an account versus your yearly checkup. It's just kind of that shift you're seeing.
Yeah, the shift you're seeing is people realizing that our healthcare system is sick care, not healthcare, right? And so people are realizing that with tools and the internet and being able to access these research papers, like how I did when I had a C-section with my daughter and she had eczema and all these conditions. I researched all the literature available, and I found out that it takes an average 10 to 15 years for groundbreaking academic research to be implemented into medical practice. But knowing what I know about the critical time period of immune modulation in the child's gut, I can't wait 10 to 15 years. That's too late for my kids. So I built Tiny Health as a way to empower customers to take their health into their own hands. So and I know you guys invested in Everly Well, and it was similar kind of theory with COVID happening, and people are now comfortable with at-home testing, getting more data about their own biomarkers and metrics, and really taking action, right? Like, most doctors are great when it comes to treating an accident, operating on your broken foot, but they're not trained necessarily in nutrition, diet, supplements, or kind of like how to prevent chronic conditions, right? So, we're in this pediatric chronic condition crises now where the CDC says 1 in 2 kids have at least one chronic condition, and a lot of it is linked back to early life gut. So, now we know that 80% of our immune system is in the gut. And so, I think the fact that we've had so much success in the first few years in terms of consumer demand shows how much people want to take charge of their own health, for sure.
We have time for one more question.
You had mentioned that it helped to this business to help adapt the filter for the fire business. What are the specific things that you found here the second time around?
Having been a prior founder, what are the things I'm finding easier this time around? Well, I wouldn't say, I mean, it's you have more confidence, I guess, as a founder, and nothing is really truly easier. Okay,
Just different.
Yeah, maybe that fundraising, that seed round was easier, so I would have to admit that. But again, it was 2021, right? I think knowing what to focus on, because I think as a first-time founder, focus is always kind of a key thing. Like, you may want to do everything at once, but I've learned to do one thing and one thing really well. So that was a core learning. But also, I think as a founder, your main job as a CEO, apart from finding product market fit, which is maybe the most important thing, is hiring the best people, right? Replacing your functions that you're doing everything at first, and you're hiring the best people to replace your functions. So getting better at hiring people and firing less, or finding that faster if you don't work out, and then also keeping the lights on with making sure you have enough money in the bank, which could be fundraising, or it could be really managing your finances really well, making sure you have enough revenue to meet your milestones.
So, given the time, I want to end with the last question. Obviously, we'll be running around, so given the topic of this conference, I wanted to kind of give a little twist on the signature question I was asking at the end of the podcast. So, what's next in Austin for startups in data, generative AI, and machine learning?
Good question. I built my first company in New York, actually, during the New York tech boom in 2009. And then I moved to, when my company was acquired by Walmart Labs, I moved to Silicon Valley in 2013. So I've seen both ecosystems. And then I ended up in Austin about 2 years ago. And I think what I found about Austin startups in general is that we're all just kind of heads down, very even keel, building real companies and real businesses that aren't so fluffy, right? So we may not be the splashy, like front page news, in the news all the time companies that you may see a lot more within Silicon Valley. But I find that companies here are pretty, just we're doing your thing, but you're building a real business. So I would say keep it up, Austin. I think I really enjoy being here, and I really enjoy being one of those companies heads down building.
So what's next, Austin? We're glad you've joined us on this journey. Please subscribe at your favorite podcast catcher, leave us a review, and let your colleagues know about us. This will help us grow the podcast and continue bringing you unique interviews and insights. Thanks again for listening, and see you soon.